Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Backtrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts, Caliban, and all hands make sail, to'garns and courses, stand by the braces. I'm joined in this episode by my co-host.
I'm Gooey Fame. You can call me El Supremo.
And we have returned to explore the stories behind your favorite Trek tales. And today we're going back to where it all started, the granddaddy backtrek of them all, to look at one of the inspirations behind Star Trek itself, the Horatio Hornblower series of novels by C.S. Forester, and specifically the first published Hornblower novel, The Happy Return, or as it's known in America, Beat to Quarters.
Yes, we're all the way back at the beginning, the genesis of it all.
Yeah, and it's not a video game arcade book, but it kind of sounds like it. Beat to Quarters.
Beat to Court. Yeah. That would be a great arcade name that's like nautical themed.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Well, they're all wood paneled back in the day. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe the employees have to wear brass buttoned coats or something like that.
Yeah, they got little hats.
Little bicorn hats. Yeah. Yeah, excited to talk about this today because it's been a long time coming. And it's something that only until recently I'd just heard that Star Trek, or at least the character of Robert April, later Captain Kirk, was inspired by the series of novels, but didn't really know much about them, and then dived into the world of them and really, really liked them. Really excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, same. For me, it's always like you hear that, and I'm like, yeah, sure, that's a real thing. I've heard of that.
Makes sense.
But I haven't, and so it was cool to finally experience one of the stories.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about that in a little bit, but first, what's going on with you?
Not a whole lot. I was just chilling today. It was a snow day, but then it turned into just it rained, and now the snow is gone, and it's just like ugly outside.
Yeah, it obviously the weather is something that people are looking at very closely these days with the climate changing. But I was looking at my Lyft app, and it's got a section for like the bike program they've got in town where you can rent a bike, or like the scooters that they have. And a little thing came up and it said, well, we're going to wrap it up November 14th of this year. So, be ready for that when that happens. And it isn't like completely strange that we haven't had snow before Halloween where I live here in the north. We usually do, but it's not like unheard of to not have snow before Halloween. But we have not had snow before Halloween. And, the snow fell like the 13th, like the day before they decided that they were going to pull all the scooters off the streets. So I wonder, like, that algorithm, I know a computer made that decision, right? They leave all these decisions to computers and algorithms. I wonder if that algorithm could maybe do the weather for us, because it seems to be pretty accurate. I don't know how they knew exactly the day that the snow was going to fall here, but they nailed it. That's because you can't really ride a scooter in snow. That's a tough proposition.
Yeah, I actually hadn't considered the fact that they would take those out. I was just
yeah. You live in San Diego, it's year-round service, but not where I live. Yeah.
Everyone needs to start living by the scooter cycle. then you'll be ready for the snow. Just pay attention to the scooter schedule.
Yeah, I thought it was very uncanny that they knew exactly when the snow was going to fall. But yeah, the snow has fallen here, and I'm sure that's just the first of many flakes that will be coming. We should be talking right now about the news in the world of Star Trek, and one of the things that I want to talk about is something that people are waiting for to come and haven't seen it yet. We've been talking about the idea of a Star Trek 4 recently, but Zachary Quinto was asked by Forbes magazine about his life, but specifically about the existence of a Star Trek 4. Of course, Christmas 2023 was the original release slot that Paramount had set for Star Trek 4, and no go. It's pulled it out of there. That's not going to happen now. And nobody knows what's going on with Star Trek. And they asked the guy that plays Spock in those movies what he thinks and what he's heard. And he has said, essentially, his quote from the article was, quote, "At this point, I honestly have very little attachment to it. All of us would like to come back and make another movie, but I've learned to only get excited about things I know are actually real. There's nothing about a fourth Star Trek movie that feels real right now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That sounds dire.
That's yeah, and I actually misspoke. He was talking to the Independent in the UK. He had actually talked to Forbes earlier in the year and said something to the effect of similar, like he didn't know if it was going to come together. To just like, I'm not going to wait for the phone to ring, but I'll answer it if it does. And so the stars of Star Trek also seem to think that there isn't going to be a Star Trek 4. You know, recently Zoe Saldana was being interviewed for Deadline's 20 Questions podcast, and she had said that that they were, quote, in touch with JJ and trying to see if they were going to be able to do it this past fall, and it wasn't possible. And she says, I have my sort of ideas that maybe it was just like schedules weren't going to work. We couldn't manage to get a cast together. But I think as well, it probably has something else to do with the project, end quote. And so everybody is speculating on what she meant by that, if she was referring to anything specific.
Yeah, that's weird. Huh, it's not looking good. This doesn't sound good.
It doesn't. And of course, we know that, losing Matt Shackman, who they had pretty much relied on to be the developer and director of the movie, that's going to slow it down without any question. Somebody had been talking to Chris Pine, I think, earlier in the year, and he had said that he had spoken directly to Paramount executives and had advised them to not try to make this a Marvel level production, to not worry about the box office not matching a Marvel or DC film, to not feel like they have to spend, to find the right balance between the budget and the scale, which is something that I think Star Trek has succeeded in the past. So it's interesting that somebody like Chris Pine, who I believe has directed a film now, or maybe it's in the can still, but somebody who, is a successful kind of A-list star is like telling the studio, guys, mid-level's fine. We don't have to go big on this. We can just get what we can get, please the fans, and get out of there. And Paramount Pictures CEO Brian Robbins has said in the past, actually this year he said, that they want to release 15 films. They want to recommit, to having a lot of films, not just Mission Impossible, Transformers movies, but to get a lot of movies out there. And they are bullish on Star Trek. They said that they want to make a multi-film plan. And Robbins said, quote, where we go with the franchise next theatrically is crucial to the health of the overall franchise. So with his words, with J.J. Abrams' words earlier in this year, in February of this year, a lot of talk about how Star Trek is important, but not a lot of things seeming to get done.
What's the holdup, I wonder, then?
I don't know.
It doesn't, yeah. Something's
obviously fishy. Yeah. I mean, the pandemic threw everything out of whack. The fact that the futures and the fortunes of streamings or of the streaming business seems to be sort of up in the air. I don't know, man. Like people flooded back to theaters when they were open again. Clearly people want to see movies in theaters still. And it just seems like making a movie that wouldn't even cost as much as a Transformers movie or possibly even a Sonic movie, just making a movie and putting it out there and letting people see it, you're going to make some money. You're not going to make that big score, but you're definitely going to continue the legacy of Star Trek at the Cineplex.
Yeah, seems pretty obvious. I don't know. If Chris Pine couldn't convince him, who can?
Yeah, right. And then when they didn't seem receptive, he just kind of sat back and stared into the middle distance and didn't say anything.
So they've just all everyone's moved on to bigger and better things,
I guess.
Maybe it's one of those things where it's like everyone kind of wants to do it, but maybe everyone's too distracted by something else. I don't know.
It could be a question of real estate as well. The idea that they are investing a lot of time and energy and money into the streaming side, 5 shows in production, other shows in development. And so maybe they don't want to be the Star Trek studio, but it's like, guys, that's kind of like what you got. Mm-hmm. That's kind of who you are. And if you don't want to be the Star Trek studio, sell it to somebody else and let somebody else get into the Star Trek business. But yeah, who knows? Honestly, if they wait any longer, I think we are going to see the actors involved just say, yeah, I'm kind of past the point of Star Trek in my life. I don't think anybody involved has said, no, I don't want to do that. Like, it's too late for that. They all seem to be enthusiastic about it. But even people like Chris Pine, like Zoe Saldana, who do not need to come back at all. They've got their own thing going on. They all say they want to do it and they like doing it. So I would say that is a good sign that we should try to put something together here. And we have a treatment. We got a script for them if they want it.
Call us.
They can find it, and anybody can find it by going to enterprisingindividuals.com, listening to our episode where we crack out an idea for Star Trek 4.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I think we came up with a pretty good idea too. So
yeah,
call us.
I don't think it's too onerous, and if you can get old Chris Pine or Chris Hemsworth, I could say, in there, go for it.
Yeah, if you got the money, go for it.
How much did the new Knives Out movie cost?
I don't know.
I mean, it can't. There's no explosions or like CGI characters. Like, it couldn't have cost that much, and that's probably like a kind of like mid-budget movie, right? Like, they're making stuff like that happen. So I don't know. You're gonna have less stars. You're not gonna have anybody too famous in it. No offense to the crew of the Enterprise, but yeah, come on, guys, make this happen.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Well, we go from the adventures of a high-tech ship to a low-tech ship. Let's get to our featured subject for this week's episode. All I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by is a line from John Masefield's poem Sea Fever. It's also a line from Star Trek V, although Dr. McCoy erroneously attributes it to Herman Melville. Whether or not they ace their English lit exams, the characters of Star Trek seem fully aware how much their lives resemble those of the naval officers of Earth's history, and the resemblance is intentional. In his original pitch document for the series, Gene Roddenberry described his captain character, Robert April, as being a, quote, space-age Horatio Hornblower, end quote, alluding to the hero of author C.S. Forrester's series of novels set within the naval conflicts of the Napoleonic Wars. Hornblower, as a man and a leader of men, bears many resemblances to James Kirk and later Starfleet captains. He is intrepid but introspective. He is a cunning warrior and capable sailor, but also a man of learning, and he represents the values and interests of his nation on seas far afield from the shores of England. Forrester's Hornblower series would span 11 novels and 5 short stories before the author's death in 1966, but the first novel in the series, 1936's The Happy Return, would introduce us to Hornblower, captain of the frigate HMS Lydia, dispatched to the waters of the Pacific on a quixotic quest to undermine the Spanish Empire in Central America. We have our orders. The enemy is in sight. The word is given to beat to quarters.
Call all hands. Beat to quarters. Run out the guns. Stand by the starboard battery.
One broadside into her, if you please, Captain Bush.
Pointers on target. Linstocks ready.
Aye, aye, sir. Ready.
Fire!
You know, this is the only one I've read now, but reading it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see where this comes from, and I don't know how, I'm just getting my impression from this one book, but I think it paints a picture, of that type of character.
And this isn't technically the first in the chronology of the series. Like, this is it's around the middle, the very first book. He went back after the success of the first couple books and like wrote the backstory of the character. And so Beat to Quarters falls about in the middle, I think, of the entire series. And there's the first book chronologically is called Mr. Shipman Hornblower, where he's just just another guy on deck. And
Nice.
throughout the series, he attains the captaincy of several different ships, and eventually, a slight spoiler, becomes an admiral himself later on in the last book.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I was looking at like the books, and it looks like later on in release in the series, they start putting Hornblower in the title, You know, it seems like he becomes kind of the, you know, like that's my star, that's my guy.
Yeah, that's my Robert April or my Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
I'd always heard that. I've never really like read any books like this. There must be something that I've read, and now I can't think of anything that resembles this. Like I have read a couple of the Sharp novels by Richard Cornwell, and those novels are also set in the same time period, but they cover the land battles of the Napoleonic Wars. In fact, Bernard Cornwell was inspired by the Hornblower series to write the Sharp novels as an answer to them. You know, Hornblower is doing all this, the naval battles, and so Sharp is going to be a guy who's leading like armies on the land. And Hornblower, in addition to inspiring Star Trek, inspired many other military series. If you know the movie Master and Commander, Far Side of the World, that movie is based on the Aubrey Maturin novels, which are written by Patrick O'Brien, who was also inspired by that. The character Honor Harrington, which is like a space series, which is very similar to Star Trek, by David Weber, was also inspired by this. Honor Harrington, of course, same initials as Horatio Hornblower. So I've definitely read something that is like kind of inspired by this. I've just never read like this specifically until now.
Yeah. But I think, you know, it's something where sometimes you hear like, oh, this like inspired this, and you're like, how much is that really? Like, you know, we cover that a lot on the show where they're like, this is our homage to this, and you're like, okay, but this I could see like a lot of the things like describing the captain here, and like some of his methodologies and stuff like that. I'm like, I can like picture like Captain Kirk's mentality. You know what I mean? Some of his thought processes here, like I could kind of transpose some of that between the two.
And there's something specific about Hornblower, and we'll talk more about the character and the events of the book in a little bit. But there is something specific about Hornblower in, I guess he's kind of like a decidedly English hero. You know, the author is English, and it's about an English ship. But he is definitely about king and country and about his duty, but he's also insecure. He's sort of self-effacing. He performs well under pressure, but then second guesses himself constantly when the guns aren't firing. And I think that, you know, much like taking here's something I was watching recently, much like taking the hero of Hellblazer, the English John Constantine, and turning him into American Keanu Reeves, you're going to like spruce it up a little, you know, when you go across the pond, things change. And so when you turn Horatio Hornblower into Captain Kirk, you gotta get rid of that stuff, right? It's like, he is losing his hair, but not in the world of Star Trek. He's got great hair. He's really confident. The ladies love him and he loves the ladies. He's still like, you know, I'm married to my ship and my crew, and I've got this sense of duty, but also, you know, I'll have a little green drink with a green lady.
Definitely. He's a little bit sexier for sure.
Well, more Hollywood.
Yeah, but I think there's parts in the book where it shows like Kirk could kind of one thing he does a lot is he will like go along with something, or like he can basically bluff someone out pretty well, and you can sort of see not him like bluffing, but in this book, you know, he has to kind of ally with like different sides and stuff like that, and he kind of has to appeal to different people, and that was something that I found very like Kirky about him.
Yeah, him having to basically wheedle like this crazy ruler guy and just be like, I hate this guy. This is crazy. Plus, like, my Britishness is just revolting at like, just like the culture shock of being in Central America, and I hate their food and I hate all this stuff. But I have to just, you know, yep, okay, I'll do that. I have to like be totally put upon in order to like make this mission work. And later on, when he gets kind of snubbed by the Spanish officer that keeps reporting to him, and the guy basically tells him like that he's persona non grata. He's just like, very well. well, I have your information, and I guess I shall see you at another time. And the guy's like, wait, you're supposed to be pissed off. Like, you're not pissed off. He's like, I will see you at another time. So yeah, he's pretty good. Like, not only steering the ship, under fire, but also taking the slings and arrows of diplomacy. Although he will have a success, then he'll go back to his cabin and like pull what's left of his hair out about whether he did the right thing or not, and thinking about like his future and like the fact that he's like, I want some money out of this thing. Like, I'm so poor.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, you gotta make money in this world,
Yeah, you do. And it's fascinating. I want to talk maybe a little later about like, the similarities and the differences between both of these settings, the naval tradition of the Napoleonic Wars and the Federation in the future. But class is a big part of it. There's something that we just don't. And I hate to continue to make this correlation, but like I said, I think it's apt. Class is a big part of John Constantine as a character in England, whereas in America, we just don't get that idea of class. Keanu Reeves's guy can just kind of go around and do whatever he wants. And that's a big part of this. There is I think the series, definitely this book, and I'm assuming the entire series, is an examination of the echelons of power and the way that Hornblower, ostensibly a guy who is, master and commander here on the far side of the world, is yet subject to so many other echelons of authority, be they the king, be they the admiralty, be they the guy that the admiralty has told him to listen to and help out. And he is the master of everybody on board, but he's also somebody who is averse to harsh punishment. He talks about, or he thinks about like other captains who like beat their crews or yells at them. And he's like, I don't want to do that. Discipline's important. We're not going to let people run riot, but I don't want to be a guy who's yelling at everybody. And so he's almost like a prisoner of his status and of his position.
Mm-hmm. That was something too that made me think of him kind of stand out, like similar to Captain Kirk, is that he does, he goes on these like adventures or whatever. This book has like a big battle and everything, but like a key factor of him was like he like showing his enemies mercy, trying to help some of them escape, their like death or sentences after the battle and stuff. And I thought that was like a pretty, I don't know, that like stuck out to me, I guess.
Yeah. Taking into account the idea that, they're all here to take advantage of the new world, and they're fighting wars over trade routes and things like that.
Yeah.
And colonialism. But yeah, he's still somebody who's like, I don't want to see like my enemies like suffer. Like I'm trying to just follow my orders and forward the aims of the British Empire. And he does that. That's what they're here for. We pick up in the book, and they are sailing in the Pacific along the coast of South America on their way to what is essentially El Salvador to help out. This is the early 19th century. So at this point, England and Spain are at war with each other, while at the same time, Napoleon is running roughshod over Europe. And so he has his orders to go to this port, to go to El Salvador and essentially Panama, and help a rebel leader there. And the idea is that he's going to give this guy guns, he's going to give them support, and they are going to undermine the Spanish's interests there and hopefully gain Britain a foothold in Central America and hopefully South America.
Mm-hmm. Which is... Yeah, well, I mean, the guy they end up meeting, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have to remember that this is like, it's funny because it's all written essentially with an omniscient narrator that focuses mainly on Hornblower himself, although sometimes it jumps to other people. And it's usually all set within the time, but it's limited omniscience, I guess. But it's slightly omniscient in that sometimes it mentions like, oh, the lady that they had on board is like helping in the hospital, and this is before the time of the Florence Nightingales of the world, so it sometimes steps outside of
it's a little
time
strange
period.
when it does. But
there is no Panama Canal at this point, but characters often say, somebody someday should just carve a canal through here, so the Spanish can't run everything. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be you; it'll be America, but yeah,
they had to do a prequel for the Panama Canal.
Yeah, this is the Panama Canal prequel. Which, before the Panama Canal, boy, it took a long time to sail where you're trying to go. The Happy Return, the titular Happy Return is them taking this long sail back to England after finishing their mission. And it's really only like 2 chapters of the book, but they talk about how it takes months and months. Yeah.
The start of the book actually reminded me more of the start of The Cage, where they're like,
check the circuit.
Yeah, and they're just kind of like, oh man, being in space it's kind of tough,
In space a long time, and the crew is, the crew like Hornblower, but they've been sailing for like 7 months, and Hornblower's talking about how they've got nothing left to eat. Essentially, they're just like, licking the wrappers of everything, and he's down to hardtack biscuits. And there's a great passage where he talks about not really wanting to eat his biscuit, but he's tapping it against the table in hopes that all the weevils will have crawled out of it by the time that he has to stuff it in his mouth. And so you get the idea that it's tough. It's tough to be out here. And one of the problems that he has to think about is, they're going to this like lush world of like exotic fruits and dusky women. And so he's got to make sure that his crew is happy so they don't like try to jump ship as soon as they hit land.
Yeah, it reminded me of Kirk in that episode we just watched, the Jack the Ripper episode, when he's like, I'm going to get Scotty laid.
Right, yeah. I know this place. There's so many bananas there, yeah. But, and speaking of sailing, we learn almost immediately that despite all of his peccadillos, Hornblower is a extremely gifted sailor, to the point where part of his mission, his sealed orders that he's received, that he's not allowed to even open until they reach the waters of the Pacific, are to basically, thread the eye of the needle and land in this bay where they're going to meet the forces of this general. And he can't sail along the coast as you might do, because we can't let anybody know that he's coming. No other Spanish forces can see him. So they have to like angle all the way out into the middle of the Pacific and then basically just, come straight into the bay. And the entire time he's like, I'm not going to do it. We're not going to make it. I don't think we're going to make it. There's no way. It's too tough to do. Everybody would say, there's no way you could make it. And then the guy like sights the bay and he's like, I think we made it. And he's like, yes, of course we made it. And he's like, totally like, yes. But then immediately he starts feeling bad about like, feeling good about how good of a sailor he is. So they make it to this bay, and they go to shore. And they find the very scared sort of lieutenants of this guy, El Supremo, His Excellency Don Julian Maria de Jesus de Alvarado y Moctezuma, who is basically a tin pot sort of dictator who claims that he is descended directly from the Incan ruler or the Aztec ruler Moctezuma, and so by his divine right, he has decreed that all of Central America belongs to him. They are going to drive the Spanish out, and all of his forces, wherever they go, are very conscientious about destroying religious iconography. Of course, at this time, very important at this time, the King of Spain is known as His Catholic Majesty, and so they don't want any part of this. This is a new cult, basically. Like the guy's a big cult leader.
Yeah, and this was episode 1, I feel like. There's a few Star Trek episodes going on here. I kept thinking about this in the Star Trek sense, and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty classic, like, kind of meeting a cult of personality almost, or like a, this sort of figure that's leading this sort of fringe group or whatever.
We're asked to do something, And it's something that we immediately learn is a little distasteful. This planet has a slave class. This planet is a bunch of Swedish masseurs, and they like sex a little too much, but they serve like a weird god, and they kill people for stepping on flowers. Like there's immediately a problem here that we're going to have to sort of tiptoe around. And in this specific case, it is serving this guy who, sure, we don't like the Spanish either, but his aims are so far afield of what Britain would want or believe. Very distasteful to the British sensibility.
Yeah. So, and they don't really, solve it, but.
And this is written in like the late 30s, so things aren't exactly super progressive, but you get the idea that it isn't like a racial, thing so much as, the book focuses specifically on Hornblower not liking the way that Supremo treats his subordinates. He will punish and kill people for like the slightest infractions. And as he rides to Supremo's estate, the road there is like littered with men who have been bound to stakes to die of exposure and thirst, essentially. And he like kind of toys with the idea of like freeing them or like trying to like talk Supremo into letting them go. But he's like, this is nothing I can do. Like I have my orders. I can't piss this guy off.
Yeah. So there's like that reminds me a lot too of like being kind of bound by it. It reminded me a little bit of like the Prime Directive type storylines where it's like we have this mission from Starfleet. We want to uphold what we're our orders and everything, but is this kind of right to interfere? They don't fully go there with that. Like that's not really what the story's fully about, but I got some taste of that. Yeah,
our hands are bound in this case by our responsibilities and by the overarching mission that we have here. This their mission is one of war and conquest by a long road, whereas Starfleet's like, well, we want to explore, I guess. Nobody ever talks about the fact that Starfleet does make colonies. They colonize all the time.
Well, that's something I liked about the book, is that while it's it is an older book and it's not fully progressive, it is like it doesn't really like hide away from the fact that they are like colonizers or and there's like some racialized things in the book, and I think it doesn't shy away from it because maybe at the time it wouldn't be as controversial to depict it, but I think like it depicts it, it shows that that's a facet in it. The fact that like, that isn't something that Hornblower is really going to do is, I think, actually represented well in the game, in the book, in the video game version of the book.
I don't know if there is a Hornblower game, but there ought to be.
That would be sick.
Let that one drop. There have been a couple film versions and like TV versions, but I don't think any feature films.
Sid Meier's Pirates.
Yeah, there you go. Something like that. The first problem is that they need supplies, and Hornblower, it basically, without totally bowing and scraping, is ready to just go, okay, and just, give this guy all the praise that he wants. But he kind of stops short at the fact that, the larder is empty on the ship. Like they need things from the mainland. And he almost blows the deal by basically holding his services hostage until Supremo agrees to give him, it's like 500 pigs and like tons and tons of sugar and coffee and all this stuff. Like you never think about the fact that they need so much stuff. Of course, as Hornblower says, like the 380 men aboard my vessel, which reminds me of when Kirk always talks about the 420 men and women aboard his vessel. Yeah,
that was exactly one of those moments where I felt like he was Kirky, because it was like, he's sort of having to like negotiate and like play a little bit hard and kind of risk things. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because he needs something in return. But yeah, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that is totally intentional on the part of the TOS writers, at least. And it isn't just Roddenberry. Gene Kuhn wrote the episode Metamorphosis, which introduces the character of Zephram Cochrane. And the character of Hornblower is based on a couple different people. He's based, I think, mainly on Horatio Nelson, of course, the famous admiral at that time. But also there is a Lord Cochrane who has seafaring exploits.
Oh.
And so, yeah, I think he was also a inspiration for both Horatio Hornblower, but on a longer road, Zephram Cochrane. The big problem here is once they get victualled and they get all their stuff in the ship, there is a Spanish galleon basically in the waters here. And you don't think about, like, when I think about the age of sail, I think of like hundreds or thousands of ships all over the Pacific and the Atlantic. But at this time in this place, there's really only like 2 ships in this area in thousands of miles of sea. And one of them is the Lydia, Hornblower's ship, which is a frigate, which is a lighter ship. And the other is the Natividad, this Spanish ship, which is a 50-gun 2-decker, which is like a ship of the line, basically. It is an Enterprise to a Voyager. To Horatio's Voyager. So the idea is their orders are to take this thing out, and it's not impossible, but it's going to be really tough. And Hornblower is a little worried, a little scared, but also excited at the prospect. And he knows if they can capture this ship or even sink it, it'll be a real flower in his lapel, and it might lead to a commission, to a reward for him and his men. It's the kind of thing that he needs, because even though he's a captain, he's got a tattered coat and tears in his silk stockings. I love the fact that, like, we have to track the status of his wardrobe, as the book goes on, and he's just like, man, my clothes are getting so messed up, and he can't afford to replace them, but he has to look like anywhere. Yeah, he has to look like this captain who's in control of everything. Yeah. So they have to go out and take out this ship. But they get kind of lucky, because it turns out that this ship is pulling into the bay as they are just finishing up resupplying their ship. And so through a few moves of sort of daft seamanship, they stage this surprise attack on the ship. And they actually end up taking the ship without like a single casualty on their side. They kind of like jump it, like when it comes into the harbor or into the bay one night, and totally surprise them and manage to just take the ship out.
Yes, this is episode 2 of the show, and they're like,
we're plotting the Netflix series here.
They're like, in the Star Trek, this is the part where they're like, cut all power except to life support.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, get him.
They talk about different crew members in the book, and we do know that there also are some Royal Marines on board. And so after they get the officers, they like capture the officers. The sailors themselves have no real allegiance. They are not affected by these orders. These are the lower deckers, not like Starfleet lower deckers. These are soldiers who have been impressed, into duty. They're whipped. They are just told to do something. Many of them, the book says, are natives. Many of the original Spanish crew has just died off at this point. And so you could just basically say to them, like, you guys just want to work for us now? And I guess the answer is yes. But the officers are all put on deck. While at some point, Hornblower is dealing with one of the lieutenants of El Supremo, who has like gone back on one of his deals. And they've got all the officers on deck and the Marines there. And then also like some of the cannon crew have all pointed cannons like directly at the deck of the Natividad. Mm-hmm. So like the implication is, give us what we want. We wanted all those cows and sheep. And if you don't give them to us, we'll just put some holes in the bottom of this thing. And that'll be it for this ship that you want so bad. So again, it's him not making explicit threats, but, making it clear that you are dealing with somebody who also has power in this situation.
Yeah. That's when Picard's like, yeah, well, I guess since I was the Chadich or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, dang it.
El Supremo Kempek. Yeah, I'll just tell him the next time we're having tea. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm only going to be connecting this to various Star Trek episodes. That's what we're doing. To do.
That's what we're here for. So yeah, they captured this ship. Now they got 2 ships. And so the plan is to ferry El Supremo's army further up the shore to the mainland where he can attack San Salvador or some capital and try to overthrow the Spanish powers there. And the book kind of skips over this because it's not really, a naval action fun time. But we get more of a sense of like, man, I really don't like these guys, and I don't like that we have to work with them. But they're going to take out the Spanish, and so that's good. So these 2 ships ferry everybody over there, and now Hornblower is free to return to England, and he leaves the Natividad in the hands of Supremo and his men.
I was thinking too, like just in terms of like it not, because I feel like it, even though it's not really like a commentary, the book, it doesn't shy away from showing like, well, look, we like teamed up with like this crazy guy who seems like he'll probably do a lot of horrible things, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, and it's another thing where he just sort of shrugs. He's like, I mean, I don't know what I can do about it.
Yeah, well,
these are my orders. We're all at the mercy of the powers that be, and we are specifically at their mercy because on his way back, they are met by another Spanish ship, and at first they're like, "Are we going to do a fight here?" But the Spanish ship, runs up the white flag and sends a boat out, and he meets a Spanish officer who says, "Oh, great. Hi, here's a letter. It's very important. You should read this." And the letter is basically new orders saying, because of things that are happening in Europe, things that happened in real life, this defeat of Napoleon at, I think it was Austerlitz, we're now teamed up with the Spanish. So don't worry about it. Everything's fine. You can go to Panama and check in with the boss there. And also, we're going to need you to get that ship back or sink it. So now El Supremo is his enemy, and he has to fight the ship that he just gave to his now new enemy.
Where they were already like outgunned and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just reveals like the kind, like you're right. Like this would be like maybe the end of 2 or the end of episode 3, where we see the kind of changing fortunes of war and how different treaties make, allies out of enemies and vice versa.
Yeah, you see that a lot. And I feel like too, you were talking about how it shows how they're like really everyone there is sort of at the mercy of some sort of greater, will, I guess, except for El Supremo. He's kind of his own greater will. But like it also made like the book also made me feel like how they are, but it's also like they're so disconnected from things, so like they can do this, like they're getting these orders from so far away, and it's like after they already switch sides, and like at first too, I think they're like, is this even is this a real order? At first they question it.
Yeah.
But it just makes me think of like how crazy that is, that like they have to do all this while like their connection to home is like a thread, or like in Star Trek, that's a factor too, where it's like, are we in contact with Starfleet? Like, how do we communicate with like what's actually going on out here? Sometimes that is a factor.
Yeah, that there was a real world like incident, or maybe just like the circumstances of this time period, the Age of Sail, that inspired Forrester to begin this series. And it was specifically the idea that a British captain representing British interests and fighting a war against the Spanish could be doing something that was, completely fruitless, because meanwhile in Europe, the war was over and nobody had gotten the message out to like ships. He probably, I always think about the guy, like the last guy to die in World War I, there's like a picture of a guy getting shot or something like that. And some guy went over the wall 2 minutes after like the armistice was called and they hadn't blown the whistles yet. It's that sort of thing. The fact that like the whims of these nations, cause good, intrepid men and women to do things that are ultimately fruitless. And that's kind of the situation that Hornblower is looking at now, because he's like, God, I got to get the ship back from these assholes that I just gave the ship to. Yeah. So that's his job, that's what he's got to do now. He stops off in Panama where there is, English control and friendly people there. And he meets Lady Barbara Wellesley, who is a lady. She is a fictional sister of the real Lord Wellesley. And she and her maidservant are kind of trapped there. Her ship was captured by Spanish people, and then she got let off and like traded to the English. Or no, I think the Spanish are still in control of Panama because they're friends at this point. And she has no way home. And instead of waiting for a ship because there's a outbreak of yellow fever in the city, she's like, "Oh, I'm going to come with you guys." And he can't really say no. And so this drives Horatio crazy, at least at first, because now he's like, got a woman on my ship, and she's just going to be taking my cabin. And the book has a little fun describing the indignities that he has to go through to give up his already very tiny cabin to take Mr. Bush's cabin, his first officer.
Yeah, he seems more bothered than anyone else.
Right. Yeah. Everybody else is just like, okay, cool. There's a lady we can talk to sometimes. But now he's got to sleep in a smaller place, and he has to like worry about how he looks. He's always worried about how he looks to his men, but now he has to like kind of impress this woman as well. And it really bothers him for a while. He also doesn't like the fact that she's so hot. He's like, God, why is she so hot? I'm mad that she's hot.
I'm too horny.
And he's been out here for a while.
Yeah.
We find out that he has a wife. His wife, Maria, is back in England. And we don't get a ton of backstory about her. Maybe it's for the better, as we learn later. But we find out that they had 2 children who died of smallpox, very tragically. And so he doesn't speak very well of her. You get the idea that their marriage isn't that great. And of course, he spends a lot of time away from her as a captain of a ship. And so just keep that in the back of your mind as our ship goes out to very intrepidly take down the Natividad, which they eventually have to do. They run into the Natividad out in the open water, and it's on. They're going to have to fight these guys.
And this was like the largest section of the book, I feel like.
Yeah. This is the Helm's Deep. This is the Regula Nebula a fight of the book. And it's a really great sequence. It's sort of split up by this interminable period of like repair when the 2 ships clash. Obviously, the Natividad is larger, has a lot more firepower, but Horatio Hornblower is a better captain and strategist. And so they kind of like both stab each other. And then in the midst of this storm, they kind of separate and within sight of each other have to weather this storm while frantically trying to repair their ships and bury their dead. It's very reminiscent, and it should be, of The Wrath of Khan, where where the Enterprise and the Reliant, first meet each other, damage each other greatly, and then have to sort of limp back to the battle in the second half of the film. And
this is the big battle episode.
This is how you know that, this is the episode of the battle. This is how you know that the Hornblower thing works, because Nicholas Meyer had no experience with Star Trek and didn't know anything about Gene Roddenberry and how he, was inspired by Horatio Hornblower. And when he was given the job to direct and later rewrite the script, he's like, I'm a big fan of the Horatio Hornblower novels, and this really feels to me like that sort of thing. So they both kind of found that independently. And by this time, Star Trek had become its own thing with many colors of lights, green, purple, you name it, and many alien women for Kirk to kiss. It had kind of gone off of the naval tradition, and Nicholas Meyer sort of brought it back to that naval tradition for the films. And of course, everybody responded really well to that.
He gets it.
I just think that's really interesting.
Gets it.
Yeah, he got it.
Oh, man.
That was the original intention, yeah. So, at this point, they really need to either sink or capture this ship. They describe the many dead. I think like 30-something people die, and almost 70 more are wounded out of the crew of like 400 in the course of this battle. And there's a really tense part where their mast, their mizzen mast, their rear mast is blown apart, And when that happens, it falls into the water and it becomes, an anchor, essentially. It stops you from maneuvering. And so there's this sequence where Hornblower himself like grabs an axe and they're all trying to cut the ropes, and free the mast while they're still being fired on. And there's this like gruesome sequence where it talks about there's a couple different points in the book where it focuses in on what Hornblower's focused on, and he's almost like experiencing what's going on from like far away. Like it talks about how as he's like hammering away at this rope, like he can almost see the individual grains of wood, in the deck, in the decking. And it cuts right from that to there's another shot and like the body of Clay, his midshipman, falls into his arms and he doesn't have a head. And he's like, he sees it almost the same, like, oh, this is happening. This is a thing, as he's like focused on like his task. And they get beat up pretty bad. I learned a lot about like what happens when a ship gets wounded. All those pirates movies, the Caribbean movies, told me nothing. And one little book taught me a lot about what happens to a ship when it gets fucked up real bad in a battle. They take a huge hole in the side, and for like the whole middle part of the book, there's just 20 guys, or at least 20 guys on a crew at a time, just pumping water out of the boat because there's this huge hole in the boat. And they put a sail across it. Of course, the sails are, treated and like oiled so they keep water out. So you can imagine the ship just sailing with like this huge patch that's a sail in the side of the boat trying to keep this water
insane. That's crazy.
And in the middle of the battle, like they have to, as they sort of part from the other ship, they have to like rig up a mast because they can't do what they need to do. They can't maneuver without a mast. And so it feels like, Scotty trying to jury rig, the engine so that the Enterprise can get a little more power as they're, maneuvering against the Romulans or something. The episode Balance of Terror is very reminiscent of a sea battle like this.
Yeah, where there's like almost these periods of downtime too, where they have to like get ready for the second wave almost.
Yeah, and it's taxing on Hornblower. He's been in battle before. He has won in battle before, but every time you find yourself in a situation like this, you're tested as a person. And he pulls it off, but there are parts where he's maybe not sure it's going to happen. I think at one point, like Lady Barbara, who has been, kept under decks as this is going on, but she comes up at one point and she's like, well, is everything going okay? And he's like, yeah, it's going great. It's going really great. Like he's kind of losing it a little bit. Yeah. But they keep it together and they renew their attack. There's this great part too, where now this night passes and it's raining all night. They make all the repairs they have to do and they sort of collapse and just hope in the morning that the wind will give them an opportunity to once again go after the Natividad. And the sun comes up and they find that the Natividad is trying to limp away, and so now he's in the position of like, no, you can't get away. And so there's not enough wind, so they have to put like their boats out to like tow the ship. So they're like, it's like they're crawling on their hands and knees trying to get to this ship. And as they're doing it, the Natividad has, bigger and better guns. So the Natividad starts shooting like long range at them and totally missing. But as they get closer, it becomes more likely that they're going to get hit. And so they start taking hits and they have to kind of run this gauntlet of the long guns of the ship until they can finally get within range and just let go against this other ship. And when they finally do, like they just, destroy it. And it's basically out of it. They blow all their masts off. And even at that point, they give them a chance to like, all right, we're waiting for like a flag. We're waiting for like some sign from them that, they give up. But they don't. They just ride the Natividad down to Davy Jones's locker. And that's it. There will be no capture of this ship. It is destroyed.
Which is, that gets the job done, I guess.
That's a result. That is a result. But there will be no bounty for Hornblower or his men. They can't sell off the ship and get the proceeds. They've lost all that. So their ship is basically destroyed. There's 50 people dead, many more wounded, and they're just stuck in the middle of the ocean now.
Yeah, it's like that final moment was like a desperate struggle. But now now they gotta get back.
And you feel the tension release, but also just, Hornblower's, he just being glad to be alive and to have succeeded. And that's all dashed when that Spanish ship shows up again and the officer comes out and gives him that letter. It says, thanks for destroying that ship. You are now banned from coming into any of our ports. We don't want anything to do with you. You better get out of here. You can't refuel and restock anywhere. And they're like, fuck, now what?
Yeah, again, it drives the needle in of like, you're just out here.
We're not friends. This is show war, not show friends. Yeah,
trying to follow orders, and what's it gotten you? You had to take away the ship to get it back, to get spit in the eye.
The little people, serve at the pleasure of their majesties. So, Hornblower is not going to be, he's not going to be held back by this. He manages to find an island because he can't go. He needs like a cove or a bay where they can careen the ship. That is, like, tilt the ship over and fix it. And he knows he can't do it anywhere on the coast because it's all settled. So they find this island with this little hidden bay. And they basically have to unload the entire ship, take all the pigs and everything that they had gotten before. They have to take it off the ship and just spend 2 weeks like fixing the ship, which they're able to do. And I thought it was cool that part of that is, of course, the armaments on the ship are very heavy, and so they take those off. But they also like set them up around the bay so that if anybody like comes into the bay, they can just like blow them away with all these cannons.
Yeah, they made a little base.
Yeah, they have their own they turned their ship into a base. Yeah. And they're able to fix their ship and put everything together. And finally they get to go back home. And now the long trip home begins. And in that time, after seeing Lady Barbara, not just as this like stuck up lady, who, by the way, if anything happens to her, he's really fucked because she is like, essentially part of the peerage, and his career will be over if he gets this lady killed. But that turns into something a little more. They start to spend time together and become sort of enamored of each other, even knowing that, spending months on board a ship with somebody, really a good-looking person, the only other person that is really available to you in your class, this is bound to happen. They still can't really fight their feelings for each other, and they kind of get together. But before they can really consummate anything or make any promises to each other, he does bring up the fact that he's married and that he can't really do anything. And that kind of, that sours him or her on him. And it seems like they're not going to get together. And just as this happens, they reach St. Helena, the sort of island base in the Atlantic. And he has to drop her off. He gets new orders to go back to England, and she leaves, and he wonders what his future will hold.
It's kind of saved by the bell there.
Yeah.
Like, okay, she's gotta go. Good.
He does think for a moment, maybe Maria and I should get a divorce, but apparently it requires an act of parliament and £5,000. He's got to pay £5,000 to get a divorce.
He ain't got the money.
Or is
for
that is that her? Maybe that's her part of his pension, I guess, as as the wife of a captain. So. Yeah, so that alimony, that's going to clean him out. So he's like, no, I can't get divorced.
This was kind of like the Brothers kind of episode where we had the big battle, and then now we're hanging out. It becomes like a rom-com for the last part.
Yeah, the fact that like there are more, just winning a battle, just staying alive, in the heat of a battle is one victory, but there's no way to win against the fact that you are still indebted to the crown. You still have years of service left. You're in a marriage that's loveless, but you can't get out of it because you have obligations, and you are still very much not a free person. Picard learns this in Generations when, that scene at the beginning where they're on the ship in the holodeck, that is obviously an homage to the series' roots in naval novels like this. But he talks about how, this is freedom, Will. Nobody to tell you what to do. You're out here on your own. But the truth is, it's not. It is not freedom. You are very much serving at the pleasure of the people in charge, and there are many responsibilities that call to you.
Yeah, one thing that made me think about that, sort of the kind of fruitlessness nature of some of the things, is when they roll back up and they meet El Supremo again.
Yeah,
and he's just all.
Oh, I forgot to talk about that. Yeah,
he's been captured or whatever.
Yeah, on their before they leave, after they fix the ship, and they're like, let's get the fuck out of here. They run into that Spanish ship again, and he's like, "Oh, I see you fixed your ship. Okay, well, now you're going to sail out of here. That's good. Oh, I thought you might want to check this out." And they've got El Supremo, and they've got him in chains, very similar to what he did to many other people, basically just starving to death on their deck. And you don't really understand what the Spanish captain is trying to say with this, other than maybe just showing off their prize, maybe trying to give Horatio like a little, good job. Like, hey, this guy, you hate this guy. You had to fight his men. Or maybe trying to threaten him. I don't know. But the effect is that Hornblower tries to pull his thing of, yeah, I'm cool. Yeah, I'm cool with all this. But he's like, I can't take this. Like, you are, I don't like this guy, but you are torturing him. He's a human being. Mm-hmm. And you're going to put him to death. At this point, but he was a little nuts before. He's totally lost it. Like, he thinks that he's, God of all of the Americas at this point. And so you're going to kill him, and he can't even be responsible for what he did. Like, he's mad. And the Spanish guys are like, yeah, well, what are you going to do? And he's like, all right, fuck this. I'm out of here.
Yeah, these Spanish guys were real heels, I feel like.
Yeah, not the good guys in this situation. Not like our boy Horatio.
No.
So yeah, that's it. That's the story of the Happy Return, aka Beat to Quarters. I was thinking it's very Trek-like, as we've talked about. And how do you think this would be different if it was like a TOS episode? If we adapted this to TOS, what specific elements would remain? Or let's say, sorry to interrupt, but let's say if this was a Strange New Worlds episode.
Okay. Well, I think you'd have the element of this has happened in Strange New Worlds and in the original series, but a sort of love interest coming aboard the ship and kind of putting the captain on his toes. That sort of thing that's been in both.
I wonder if the episode with Famke Janssen, where she's like the perfect mate.
Yeah.
that's the name of the episode. She's the perfect mate, but I can't remember what the episode's called. That's a very similar thing, because it's this woman that Picard can't help but be attracted to, but he can't do anything about it. He knows he can't do anything about it. And I think it's interesting. It's a little questionable in terms of female autonomy, but that sense of duty is impressed upon her as well. So at the end, she also refuses him because she feels that same sense of duty in her empathic sort of way. That would be very similar. It also reminds me of the episode that we talked about this year on the show. I can't remember the name of the Strange New Worlds episode, but it's based on Those Who Walk Away from Omelas. And the Federation is sent to essentially help a planet that's these guys are a little weird, but they seem okay. And then later it's oh, fuck these guys. No, they're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, and that's another situation too where Pike was kind of romantically involved too.
Yeah.
So she's sort of a mix of that and El Supremo, so they combine the two into one almost.
She is the El Supremo. El Supremo's hot. La Suprema. Yeah.
Yeah. He would have that for sure.
I wonder if if I ever wrote a Star Trek episode or was a writer for Star Trek, I would definitely be constantly looking back to stories like this in this tradition, both to sort of mine them for ideas, but also to make sure that I wasn't, unconsciously copying them, making the homages deliberate. And I have to wonder when you get, if it didn't exist, we wouldn't have a podcast. But I have to wonder when we find things like this, if they were intentional or not. Whoever it was that wrote that Strange New Worlds episode, were they thinking about something like this, like Beat to Quarters, or the Star Trek episodes that were specifically inspired by Beat to Quarters, and these kind of stories where, you have people who are serving a specific organization or a specific country and find themselves having to question their own morality and the choices that they're making in service of those powers. It's a very Star Trek thing.
Yeah, I think they're definitely thinking of these types of things still. Like, I think, especially you see in Strange New Worlds, I think they're trying to capture the idea of, hey, in different Star Trek episodes, they're inspired by different things. So we have a fantasy thing, a thing like, they try to, vary it up and make it about different types of stories. So I think they do know that it's like, part of it is you are paying these homages for, like, I think that's for sure a thing they're trying to do.
I guess I really like and respect that, and I think it shows that they, care about what came before. But also part of me is like, just do whatever you want. Do you know what I mean? Like, at this point, almost 900 episodes in, I kind of want our podcast to only have to focus on things that have come before. Like, I'd really like to see, without changing what's, essentially Star Trek at its core, finding new ways to tell Star Trek stories without having to go, your noble captain finds himself in a situation where he's going to have to break the rules in order to do the right thing. Like, it's like, I guess that's essentially a Star Trek story, but
yeah.
If we ever get bored, I'm sure we could find a way to do, here's an episode that inspired an episode that inspired an episode that is actually inspired by those 3 episodes before. Like, I'm sure we could find multiple layers of inspiration.
That's kind of the classic issue with Star Trek, I feel like, is, I think for a while they were able to try to tell different types of stories in a very Star Trek way. But then I think everyone eventually just got sick of it, because I think, Enterprise is still trying to do that in a lot of ways, but it seems like maybe it was just running out of gas. And then now Star Trek is struggling to, I don't know, like have a new vision or something,
Has any, other than like Mickey Mouse or maybe Superman or something like that, is there any other franchise that has existed for this long like this? This has to be one of the longest running intellectual properties ever.
James Bond? I don't know.
You're right. James Bond is older, but has fewer entries.
Sherlock Holmes, I guess they still do stuff.
Yeah.
Does that count?
Yeah. There are a lot of Sherlock's. Yeah. There's no real like official. It's probably the most, well, other than James Bond, which has almost 30 films, but not like 850 episodes. I think it's probably like the most prolific and oldest franchise. That is to say, every entry is official, because if you want to bring Sherlock Holmes into the 21st century, he's got a cell phone or whatever. That's fine. That has nothing to do with the original, Conan Doyle stories, I suppose. And you're kind of trying to put a twist on it. But like every time there's Star Trek, except for the Kelvin universe, it is the same universe. It is the same Star Trek.
I get you.
And so, look, fatigue is one thing, but running out of ideas is definitely another. And I'm optimistic enough as a creator to believe that you never really run out of ideas. But yeah, it's possible that maybe we need to find a new way to tell Star Trek stories. I don't know.
Where I'm at currently is I've for a while I was like, with the current Star Trek stuff, I was like, not to be one of those people, but I was just like, this is like not like how I enjoy Star Trek, I guess. Yeah. And then I felt more recently like, with some of the stuff, it's like, okay, like I think, like even watching like Prodigy or something, I'm like, okay, they've got something there, like they have some good ideas. Or even with Strange New Worlds, I'm like, okay, they get what I like about Star Trek. It has that element, but I like need to see it go like and be like a little bit more unique. And I don't know if that's possible. Maybe I'm just asking the world of it, but I want it to like feel like yeah, it's Star Trek. It fits in this universe or whatever, but like to not just be like, hey, we're another ship going on these missions or whatever.
Something that I think really works about Prodigy is that I think that they are really just bowling right down the middle in terms of telling a ongoing story with standalone plots.
Mm-hmm.
And Strange New Worlds is doing that as well, but it's mainly here's whatever the weekly thing is, and there's a scene at the beginning, a scene at the end where we remind you what the ongoing plots are.
I like that.
That's pretty typical. But what I like about Prodigy is there is an ongoing plot, and it drives them to the standalone stories. So in an effort to solve part of their ongoing problem, they go somewhere and get embroiled in something that isn't necessarily related to the ongoing plot, but they were brought there by the ongoing plot. Farscape did this very well. Farscape is like they're being hunted by an insane military commander, and so they have to go here, they go there, they go there, and wherever they go, there are things that they get embroiled in. And maybe that's like a good way forward, especially if the streaming model doesn't stop, where we just got 10 episode seasons. But I don't know. We're doing a show. I do 2 shows on Star Trek. I'm not giving up on Star Trek, but I don't know. Maybe there is a different way to tell Star Trek stories.
Prodigy also gets to thread the line in that, like, it gets to have like unique sort of characters because it's a bunch of people who aren't raised in Starfleet. You know what I mean? Like they're trying to like learn about or maybe join Starfleet or maybe do their own thing or whatever. So like we don't have to write like the same type of character, like they're a bunch of unique kids. But then at the same time, you cut to with the new season, like Janeway, and she's doing like the Star Trek episode part of it. That feels like that feels like a Janeway show.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that.
Yeah. Having like more than one narrative going on. These are all things that they're applying to Star Trek, and it's having mixed results, but maybe that's the way forward. There are a lot of reasons that this specific story, The Beat to Quarters, isn't Star Trek and can't be Star Trek. And I think one of those things is the fact that, I think class probably exists in its own way still in the 24th or the 23rd century, but it certainly applies here. It's almost 100% of the conflicts that don't involve cannonballs for Horatio Hornblower are class related. And of course that ties itself also to economics. The fact that he, is worried about money and about how he looks and what his future holds. And the men below him are also in their own way worried about that, being basically at his mercy for food, grog, entertainment and employment. All of those things are really there. I laugh sometimes about the fact that like, it seems like every episode somebody's like, I quit Starfleet. I'm going to make cotton candy instead or something. And then they join up again at the end of the episode.
Right,
and you're like, geez, how easy is it to get back into Starfleet? But in a world where essentially anybody can have whatever they want, nobody really needs to work, I would imagine that people would more easily make the choice to blow up their entire lives if they could just get it back and if they wouldn't suffer because of it. And that's something that doesn't exist in this universe.
No, it's a utopia.
Yeah, and that's good. I think it should exist in our universe too. I would love to have people quit on me and then just come back and go, sure, you can keep working there, whatever. Like Twitter. That's what Elon's doing. He's trying to make that happen on Twitter right now.
They do approach those sort of stories just like usually with, like the Klingons or something like that,
Yeah.
Like they'll like show up for someone else's class issues,
Yeah, that's where the allegory and the metaphor comes in. Also, like the reason that they're there, they're there for reasons essentially of conquest, either political or economic conquest. And instead, they aren't just explorers, they're being bankrolled as part of a military and not as explorers who are there to, often often complete political objectives. I think that is downplayed in Starfleet, but it certainly is a huge part of it. But one thing that is very similar is the idea that, out in the middle of nowhere, the captain is the king.
Yeah,
the captain is the chief representative of the society. They make the decisions. Their word is law. As soon as a ship or a transmission from an admiral comes in, then they are not the law anymore. That can change on a dime. But yeah, out in the middle of nowhere, there's no one else to rely on except for the captain.
Yeah, so like that's always in Star Trek too, I feel like a little bit. And it's like especially exacerbated when the captain meets like an energy cloud that's like, I'm going to live in you now or something like that.
Yeah, and it also it's I think exacerbated by having the story revolve, the captain be the main character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that obviously is part of TV because you want a character that you're tuning in to see every week. And I think it was certainly affected by the charisma of William Shatner as James Kirk and the power and performance of Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard. They sort of set the line as like the captain's going to be the main character. And I don't think that needs to be true, although it has been essentially true throughout all of Star Trek. But when the captain isn't the main character, then they can be flawed. And I think that's nice. There's a section where Hornblower talks about other captains and how, Nelson was good to his men. He would do this and that, but there are other captains that get drunk or are bad to their men. And I think it's okay to have a character that is not the nicest person necessarily. If Lorca didn't turn out to be like Trump from the alternate universe, a captain like Lorca, who's like, he's not your friend and he's going to yell at you and he's hard driving. He has his own way. I think people like Captain Jellicoe for that reason.
Yeah,
and you
totally.
get into trouble. You get in trouble when you've got a character like Michael Burnham, who's a perfectly fine character, but goes from being like just this kind of scrappy person who's not going to do what the authorities tell her to, until she becomes the captain herself. And instead of having a new element to her character and to her story where she has to learn to suppress those impulses, now she's just the captain that runs off and does whatever she wants. And it's like, all right, well, that's not really like character growth.
That's why I thought they were going to go with a lot of newer shows. Like, I thought that was going to be a Discovery thing. And I thought in Picard that might even be a thing, because I guess even though it's Picard, he's the captain. I don't know. I thought it might have been... I guess he is really the captain of the show. But there was, like, the whole crew and everything. So I thought that maybe they were going to set it up to be, like, not just about, like, Patrick Stewart, but to set up something different, something new.
Yeah.
But I guess with Lower Decks, they've kind of done that. That's pretty cool.
That is true. Yeah.
And this is probably the most flawed captain I've ever seen.
That is true as well. Yeah. I mean, look, people, endlessly repeat that Lower Decks is canon, but as soon as any live action show wants to do something that contradicts Lower Decks, it's not canon anymore. Do you know what I mean? But for now, it is quote unquote canon. And yeah, I think that the captain of the Cerritos is probably a good example of a person who is not perfect and not the main character. And I'd like to see more captains like that in Star Trek.
Yeah. What do you want to strike from the canon from Lower Decks?
There's a lot of stuff that, well, just first of all, how petty and venal every character is. Like, they're all terrible. Look, I'm one who would argue that people in the Federation aren't perfect, but is everybody really concerned about all the stupid things that everybody's concerned about on Lower Decks? Like, I get that it's a comedy. It's a comedy. So like, you're supposed to play things up for comedic effect, but everybody's so irresponsible and they're just all like, like, these people aren't really Starfleet officers, are they? Come on.
Yeah.
That's a different conversation for a much shorter show, hopefully.
Yeah. I have always just been like, it is a stupid comedy or whatever. So I kind of just turn off.
Like an exocomp is really like a Starfleet officer.
I thought that was that's what I was saying though. In our our last episode where I would probably enjoy the Zora storyline a lot more if it was in Lower Decks, because I'd be like, okay, yeah, this is like a silly idea.
See, but I think that they should be exploring the more serious like aspects of the Zora. I hesitate to say character because she's barely a character, but like having a self-aware ship that's not untrod ground for sci-fi.
No, yeah,
but it is for
cool.
Star Trek. Yeah. So anyway, that's all well and good. But let's talk about. Well, yeah, what if the Lydia could talk? What if the Lydia was a real lady?
Ooh.
That would take
the fifth
technology.
Book?
Yeah, that's later in the series. That would take technology they don't have in the world of Horatio Hornblower, and technology is often facilitating what characters on Star Trek do. Just as often, it's a complication that they have to deal with. So on every episode of this show, we randomly pick from a list of Star Trek technologies and add what we pick to the non-Trek media. We subtract it from the Star Trek episode, and we see how each is different. We don't have an episode this week, but maybe we could talk in a more general sense about how Starfleet would fare without a particular technology from our technological exchange. And here's the list of the technologies that we're exchanging. We've got phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drives, replicators, communicators, shields, advanced medical technology, and androids. And if I roll on my random number selecting technology, I get the number 7, which is communicators. If communicators and communication technology existed, Jesus Christ, in the world of Horatio Hornblower, how would it be different other than just not existing? Because the whole point is you can't communicate with a guy who's in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah. Well,
every time this dice hates this show. Every time it tries to kill us.
Well, it's also though
it's like our badgie. This dice is our badgie.
I kind of like it though because it's our whole point about what it's about.
All right. You know? So if we completely demolish the premise of Horatio Hornblower, can it still exist as a universe?
I
think here
yeah.
I think we get off on a technicality, because this world was commissioned by the author initially because of the lack of this technology, but it now a priori exists. So since it already exists, we can now add this technology and just describe the result of adding that technology.
Okay, so
Hornblower goes to the Pacific to do this, but at what point does he get the message, the hail from the mainland, from Europe, that no, don't, you know, the situation's different. We're allied with Spain now. It's a different situation.
I'm guessing that was probably meant to come in before they even get to El Supremo, right? Like I don't get the sense that a lot of time passes.
Yeah, there's no flowchart or spreadsheet for it, but it isn't until they just run across that lugger, the Spanish lugger, that they're like, oh yeah, we got a letter for you.
How far out was that from when they left like El Supremo?
They had just left El Supremo.
Okay.
But if they had run into them before they even got to El Supremo, maybe it's a different situation. They're like, no, fuck El Supremo. Just leave them out there. Who cares? Yeah,
so I feel like they probably would just be like, well, it would still be like about like wasting your time, because it'd be like, well, you came all the way out there. We got the word in, got it to you right away. But I mean, you still got to come all the way back.
Maybe you would have... This is something that gets glossed over a lot in later iterations of Star Trek, although it's still a big thing in TOS. You know, the Enterprise will show up at a colony and it's like, well, it's been 100 years. Let's see how they're doing, you know, because they weren't sent with subspace radio technology. They just made a colony and they don't know. And so maybe you would have a thing where ships are sent on specific missions. You know, if there's British agents in Central America, they would radio into, or subspace radio into Europe and be like, okay, there's this guy El Supremo, you know, he seems like he's got something going on. Maybe we can get him there, and then send us a ship to give stuff to this guy. That would all happen by letter, but this would be specifically by like a communication device. And then, yeah, maybe they start off on their journey and they get halfway across the Atlantic and they get a call saying, no, forget it. Doesn't matter. Now we're allies with Spain, so we don't have to worry about that. Maybe you get you don't get a sense that there is a lot of intelligence going on that is like spies. You must have them so they would know about somebody like El Supremo. But maybe there would be more, instead of sending entire ships out on these like kind of foolish, who knows if they'll succeed quests, you would have agents who are just, going up and down Central and South America and like reporting back, instead of just like, because the whole thing is like they've only sent one ship because they're kind of wasting everybody's time. That's kind of what this entire story turns out to be, a waste of time.
Yeah,
that pisses the Spanish off, because the Spanish lost a big ship out of this. You know what I mean? The Spanish would have much rather have had their ship instead of having it stolen by somebody who is their enemy who later becomes their ally. And so maybe you would have less of a waste of the time of people like, I'm not sure we haven't proved that it destroys the entire thing yet.
It just really got me thinking about how wide communication developing alongside like our ability to travel long distances. And like, I don't know, it's just thinking about a world like that where, it still takes forever to get somewhere, but like instant communication exists, is kind of like warping my brain right now.
Communication really is the problem. We talked about that on our last episode where Dave Bowman finally reaches the monolith and he's like, let's go in there. And it's like, dude, just send a signal. I think even the aliens on the other side are like, oh, you came through? No, you're just send a signal.
Okay, wait.
It would really change how we explore the universe if we could send communications faster than light. Because when we send somebody to, say, Alpha Centauri, it's over 4 years away at light speed, assuming we can go light speed, which, if we could go light speed, we would definitely send somebody. There'd definitely be somebody who's like, yeah, I'll read books for 4 years, no problem. But once they get there and start exploring, they can't tell us what they found for another 5 years, right? The message has to come back, and we can't tell them what to do until 10 years once we receive their information. So if you could cut that time to near zero, it would totally change things. And I think it would change a lot the way that maybe the Royal Navy would be mothballed, or maybe a lot of it would be decommissioned, because now you don't have to send somebody to send a letter to some guy who might be somewhere. You can just send them, a radio message. Radio did change, obviously, the way that war was fought, and a lot of things about how commerce operates on our world.
Yeah, so eventually we'll have, what do they use in subspace relays? Eventually we'll have that, yeah.
Yeah. And that's
they could have used some subspace relays in this story.
Yeah. Well, that's, and speaking of like current, modern shipping and war and exploration, St. Helena is an island in the middle of the Atlantic, part of a group of islands, including Ascension Island, and these islands were crucial for military and naval efforts during the World Wars. The British put radar stations and radio stations on them and airfields on them. And today there are NASA monitoring sites on them that keep in contact with spacecraft and satellites when they're out of the range of Houston. So it all exists today. If we took communications and communicators away from Star Trek, I think we'd have better Star Trek.
Okay. Oh, yeah? I think you've said this before. This is your theory.
Yes. This is an old theory of mine. A lot of the plots of the original series are, like I said, them just popping in to check on somebody that they haven't heard from for a while. You get a couple of these in TNG, but as we continue along the line of storytelling in the franchise of Star Trek, and also, I suppose, in the totally understandable continuing development of technology in their era, you can call anybody anywhere at any time. You can travel just about anywhere at any time, leading up to the apotheosis of this trope in the 32nd century of Discovery, where the ship can go anywhere whenever it wants. People can teleport anywhere wherever they want. It just takes the trek out of Star Trek.
Yeah. You don't just, snap and you're on the next planet or whatever.
Yeah. So I would go back to my suggestion of, I can't remember what I called it, but like the idea of a ship, the idea of Vikings in space who are just out there to see what's out there and maybe get a little something of it if they can, and landing on weird planets and just being like, what's here? Like, what are we doing here?
I feel like this type of show could exist in Star Trek. Like, you
can find like messages in a bottle, like the episode The Inner Light, where they just find this satellite where the people just wanted somebody to know about them and they didn't know what to do. And so they sent a rocket up, which is a very slow form of communication, but a satellite that had, information about them in it, like finding things like that. And yeah, put the mystery back in space. That's what I say.
It's almost like a reverse Voyager, where it's like, we're going away from home, but we have no connection to it until later seasons of Voyager. But like, that's a lot of Voyagers, like trying to decide what we want to do when we don't have any home base kind of backing us up.
Yeah, I wish they'd planned Voyager out better, spend 3 or 4 seasons getting home, and then spend the other 3 seasons like dealing with the fact that you maybe pissed off a lot of people in the Delta Quadrant, or your lives have changed, the crew is different. They kind of do that when they kind of get closer to home, but every other episode of Voyager is them pulling up to some planet. It's one guy in a room that goes, "Who are you?" "Oh, here's what's going on in this episode." And they're like, "Oh, we got to deal with this asshole." and that's just like every episode of Voyager.
Yeah, but sometimes it hits that mark a little bit.
Put the mystery and the adventure back into space travel. That's what I say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think that we have done enough adventuring for this episode, but should we tell people what's coming up on the next episode of Backtracking?
So for our next episode, we're talking about the Enterprise episode, 2 Days, 2 Nights.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be comparing it to the film To Catch a Thief.
Yeah.
I recently
excited about half of this.
Oh, okay.
I'm excited about watching the Cary Grant, Grace Kelly classic film To Catch a Thief from 1955, but not sure how excited I am about watching 2 Days and 2 Nights, the Risa Enterprise episode.
Oh, yeah. There's a little bit of, you know what? I'm stoked. I just watched this. There's some hanging out. That's pretty fun.
There is some hanging out. There is some kind of questionable sexual politics. And of course, Archer is mad at somebody and gets to kiss somebody. So that's an Enterprise episode as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I'm excited.
So look forward to that on our next episode, To Catch a Thief, and the episode 2 Days and 2 Nights from Enterprise. But that's it for this week's episode of Backtrekking. And thanks for listening. If you like the show, you can tell a friend and follow us at Backtrekking on Twitter. And also tell us what you think that we should look at in future episodes. We're putting together a list of what we're talking about on the next year of the show, and we're looking for your suggestions. So let us know at Backtrekking on Twitter. Gooey, tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Gooey Fame, and go to my YouTube channel also. I'm Gooey Fame on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm at KA1IBAN on Twitter, and at Just Enough Trope on Twitter. And I'll put in a plug too for the Just Enough Trope Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Just Enough Trope, where I've been streaming God of War Ragnarok recently. So join us for that. And that is it for us. We'll see you soon. And until then, keep on trekking.